Host Eric Harris talking on Facebook. Like, hey, I realized what the problem was when I was driving 7-Eleven to get cigarettes, which I left in the car like a fucking moron. Anyway, the problem is, in not Host Mark's world, if not Host Mark and I disagree, he's always right and I'm always wrong. Right? Because we disagree, and I'm not advocating my position based on his Christian worldview. His Christian worldview is what we need to always base policy decisions on. So if I'm disagreeing with him, then I'm in opposition to his Christian worldview, which means I'm always wrong and he's always right.
Maybe you should just learn to sit there in your wrongness.
Well, I mean, I think if I point that out to Mark, that he's not saying that God's always right. He's saying, I, not Host Mark, am infallible.
I don't know. I feel like it's easy to view someone else that way when you're like arguing with them. I feel like both parties do that to an extent.
I mean, he's really clear about this, Zach. He's saying crazy ass shit like we need to use God's law as the way to. And I'm not saying we need to pass laws that aren't in conformity with that. I'm not saying no, we need to break God's law. I'm saying we can't use God's law arguments as justifications for passing man's law.
That's where you're wrong, kiddo.
I don't think he really was clear. I don't think he was clear with what he wanted to be passed exactly. That's what I wanted him to get to.
It was a continuation of the other night's conversation. That's why he's saying that yes, the law of the land ought to be the same as the law in the Bible.
That's crazy.
Which ones? Like the New Testament?
Fucking Taylor tried to pin him down on that shit, and he's insistent on trying to find. That's why he started in with I can see this thing on the mother and father one would be a little bit of a problem. I researched it more in the Bible.
But I don't believe the people really believe this stuff, but they're following an ideology. I don't think it's a sincere belief that the book will show us the way, but that he's doing it to follow or prove something to other people.
No, or it could just be that he can't live with there not being like an absolute authority on morality. So he needs to accept God.
And he hasn't developed past that phase.
But why then does he insist that his faith be logical as well as faith?
Because he needs to keep faith.
No, but look, this whole thing has started, right? It started in a situation where it took me a long time to realize he was arguing against me in some fashion. Because I kept mistaking what he was saying as like something other than that. And eventually I came to realize, no, he's saying crazy shit. Like, we should do God's law as the only mechanism by which we determine whether a given piece of legislation ought to be passed. And I said, well, we can't use this kind of arguments.
The way I view how these things work is that you're taking a concept with high value and you're trying to instigate it onto other things. So that since you already have such a high value for this concept, you can put whatever you want in it and it'll be permissible in the ethical act. It's a form of social violence.
Who's doing what? I'm doing this, or they're doing this? I don't know who you're talking about. He's doing. Okay, well, I don't know what it is, but
I don't know his full view, but what I wanted to ask about though, well, the reason I say I don't know his full view because I'm sort of withholding judgment until I look at the other videos. But what did he mean about negating your own God? What was that all about?
Well, he doesn't like my version of God. He didn't like the fact that I call relationship with God stuff magical thinking, because he's insistent that it's not magical thinking. I say, I know people use that derisively. I'm not using it derisively. It is magical thinking, though, because it's non-rational, necessarily because it's faith-based. And that definitionally is not rational. And he threw a little fit about that. Well, yes, it is. The only logical conclusion you can make, logically, is my God.
This is kind of like a gaslighting competition. Whoever can lie the best.
No, it's not, Bo. You keep wanting to frame shit your way. You're flailing about and failing miserably to do so. Okay, so just knock it off. All right. The point is, you don't even have a definition for the word gaslight. Do you know what it means? Homie, can you turn off the fucking cartoons, please?
Sorry about that.
Make someone question their beliefs unjustly.
Okay, I want to talk about magical thinking because there has been a few times where Eric and I have picked up on the same thing that would be defined as magical thinking, but it's obviously unfalsifiable, and there's no way we can really prove its existence other than our immediate experience of it and what we labeled as. And one of the examples was when I went to Utah and I missed my plane flight, and I was like, oh no, Eric's gonna be pissed, like holy shit, like this is so bad. And then it ended up working all out where I had like my own hotel room and everything. Remember that? And that was like an odd like alignment. It was almost like when the way I describe it, because I've experienced a lot, is when like personal will aligns with like universal will, so to speak. It's a weird. I don't know how to explain it, but I totally get what you mean when you explain it, Eric. And that to me also I would equate with, if there is a God, then that is the best evidence to me as to why there would be one. But I know not everyone experiences that, and it certainly provides me no profound insights into a moral social order.
Right.
Just something.
You wouldn't use it as an argument in justifying political policy, right? You wouldn't say, we need to change this law because God indicated to me through a series of weird sort of multi-meaning symbols that I could interpret in various ways that, in fact, we ought to pass this law. You know, I mean, you wouldn't make that argument. He's making that argument.
I don't know. I've delved into that kind of stuff before, and it's like, but kind of stuff. I mean, like, sort of, for lack of a better word, spiritual thinking. But I feel like that's become very been appropriated by like the New Age sort of neo-spiritual movements and stuff. But I don't view my spiritual thoughts with a moral framework. That is just completely separate to me, you know? And it's weird that, like, I feel like if there were an instance where I was contacting some sort of divine source, it certainly hasn't provided me any insights into, you know, morality. It just hasn't provided that for me. And
I think that divine force, or that is just the resonance with your beliefs and your persuasions. So, like, once they resonate with another, you feel complete with yourself because you feel as if there's no contradiction.
Phil, is that what you would define as authentic existence?
Yes.
Hami, I want to address your point here. Hami says in the thing that I still haven't provided a justification for why we own our own bodies. Here are my justifications to be really clear about it. Number one, you own your own body because everybody acts as though you do when you're first born, insofar as they treat you as though you had natural rights to a certain extent. Now, but that's the weakest of the arguments. I want to make that clear. The next argument is you clearly own your own body because you are liable for its behavior. So we know that if you go and crash your body, let's say through a plate glass window, and then you're drunk and you then pass out on the floor of this restaurant, you dove through the plate glass window, you will be responsible to pay for it. Why? Because you own the thing that you're responsible for your property's damage that your property did, namely your body.
Who gives you this teleological power? Well, do you have this telepathical power of ownership?
But that would only be like in a structured society, though.
Hold on.
With laws.
Hold on there. Hold on, mister. Hold on. First of all, Bo, I'm describing the status quo. Right?
I'm not saying that I'm more radical
there's
than that.
no teleological power there, Bo. I'm describing something like the sky's blue, right? In the status quo, people are liable for the behavior of their bodies. Correct or not correct?
Let me ask you a question, though, Eric. Let's say like someone rides through a window or something. Now, if there was a kangaroo coming by and hopped into someone's window, we're not going to view that as some sort of like moral agency. We're just going to be like, what the fuck is that kangaroo doing there? Like, let's remove this kangaroo from the situation. So the act of something crashing through a window doesn't give its descriptive authority over its own self, right? So
it has to be of consenting nature and age.
So consensus around, or Mark's back, but consensus of the community that someone
not
jumped through the window.
consensus, not consensus, consenting. It has to be of consenting age and nature to be a moral agent. So now look, we make we make utilitarian exceptions along this issue of consent. There's no doubt that we do, as legislative bodies, we make those issues. We define consent. We have age of consent, and we have various other criteria you need to make to consent. But once you acknowledge that you are a consenting individual, now it is fair enough to say that while you own your own body when you're a baby, there is a need to provide guardianship as you develop into a proper property owner. So at first, you're a bad property owner. You're not capable of owning your own body well. But eventually, you learn to do so. The point is, the biggest reason why you own your own body is because I've yet to hear anybody provide me any reasonable alternative to go with. Now, we know bodies are ownable because
You're
of
the
slavery.
one that's making the claim, though.
Okay, bodies are ownable because of slavery. So we know they're possessable as objects of ownership. So
Only
the
as
question
much-
is, if not you, whom?
Only as much as you can force them.
Correct. But the fact is, I agree. And the body is ownable as ownership, not the human being, right? I've made this distinction multiple times. The reason the human being's not available as an ownable thing by another person is because you can't transfer your will over. You can't sell yourself. That's why you can't sell yourself, right? But the fact is, we do know that the body is ownable, and we know that somebody owns it because somebody's held liable when it does shit. Now that's descriptive. It's true. Those are all amply good reason to believe you own your own body. You may not think they're enough to prove the point, Hami, but they're better than any alternative you've shown me, and they are standing warrants.
I think that whoever asserts directive authority over the baby would be the one who owns it.
I mean,
Repeat that.
Say that again.
Okay, I would say that what gives someone directive authority over their own body is sort of how Bo said. They recognize and they're willing to assert their unethical state. And because a baby can't do that, I would say that whoever assumes directive authority over it, which is most of the time like the mother and the father, that they would then own it. And the baby can no longer own itself until it's able to assert its ontological state.
If that were the case, then your house sitter would own your house while you're gone.
I think that only because we live in a society that doesn't agree with that, like sort of the social order that currently exists. I think that's the only reason.
I mean, but it's possible to place your property under the custodianship of somebody else, right? And still retain ownership of it?
Yes, but here, finish your point. Yes, I'll concede.
So
that, yes.
I would say it's reasonable to think, hey baby, it's reasonable to think that society would have reasons to preserve the property rights of someone not currently able yet to exercise them of children, because we know that while it's a unique situation. First of all, like the babies require a different set of rules because, well, they're babies, you know. And I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me to confer ownership on the parents. It seems to say that being a good parent means being a good guardian and custodian of your child's self-owned body. That's why, like the courts, you can't, if you have a child and they're a movie star or something and you're the parents, you can't just steal all their money that they make, right? It's illegal, and the courts will come down on you because ultimately they do own their own body. It's their labor when they're working as child stars, and they should get to keep the proceeds of it. The parents shouldn't be able to plunder it from them. So we certainly act as though they own their bodies.
So how would this play out outside of society, in the natural state?
You'd have to. It's the same thing. Like, it would be the same thing. You'd have to assert your own, like, directive authority over it. But I mean, the thing about the transferring of property, I think that, like, let's say I loan Bo here my cracker, and I say it's still mine. I just want you to hold on to it, right? If he concedes that and is just like, okay, well, this is still Zach's. I'm just holding on to it. Then it's thus, I suppose, actualized, right? The property ownership of mine is still actualized in itself. Now, if he turned around and decided, this is mine now, The only reason that he still wouldn't be able to grab a gun and be ready to defend this cracker from me obtaining it back is because of our social order. So I think that property ownership is something that...
But there's a better reason for it, though. There's a better reason. It's because you paid for it and he didn't.
But why is that relevant to who owns it?
Because the first thing you own is your labor. So if you have nothing, right? You have nothing, but
What if you didn't pay for something and someone gives it to you? What if you get something from nature? What if you steal something from, like, the ground?
Okay. So
No one paid
okay.
for that.
Okay, hold on. I'll answer your questions. So, if you pay for something and you say, "Can you hold on to this?" and the person says yes, they're entering into a contract with you that says, "I will hold on to this for you. I may or may not lose it, but I understand that I am in possession of your property right now. I have a bunch of people's property right here in my house. I've got somebody else's drum, somebody else's electric piano, somebody else's bass amp. They're all here. I'm using them, but I understand it's still their property." Now, you might say the only thing that prevents me from taking ownership of these is some sort of societal order, but I would point out the thing that prevents me from taking ownership of them is that I haven't exchanged any wealth for them. And the reason that they own them is because they exchanged their wealth for them. And that doesn't change just because it's in my possession.
Is it moral to steal from trees?
I mean, I think the purchase thing doesn't really matter, though. I mean, if I found a rock or something and decided that was mine, and that I left it at your house or something, it would still be the same situation. I don't think it really matters.
But you would have purchased it with your labor to go find the rock.
Let me ask you a question.
Interesting way to look at it.
Is it immoral to steal from trees?
I don't think you can steal from trees because
Taking literally their entire life vessel.
well, look, there may be good cause to wonder about our relationship with other species on the planet. Okay, I'm not denying that. The general philosophical answer is non-sentient creatures are not moral agents. Therefore, they have neither rights.
But what makes us more agents?
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure I agree with this, and I do feel as though if we're going to collapse somewhere on this model, it collapses when we go to different species. Because I do believe animals ought to be treated as though they have certain rights beyond nothing, and I understand that if we allow that, then you have a slippery slope and it's kind of tricky. But the good news is, we do know this: the only people who participate in public policy are human beings. We know that. So I can limit it to that frame of reference only, and then I don't got to worry about the animal shit. They're not going to be voting anyway.
I feel like
I think an animal only has much.
Yeah, my only problem is how would this apply to in a stateless society though?
Okay, wait, hold on, one at a time. Zach, you go first. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I just want to respond to the stateless society thing. I will say that when we first were settling in America, the West was way farther away from any governmental infrastructure, and they still respected property rights. So that would be my response to that. Now, Richard, what I was going to say, I don't fucking know. I forgot.
Mine would be that an animal can only have so many rights as it's able to convince others to defend them.
Well, I mean, you're onto something there, Bo. Animals don't have rights in part because they can't claim that another violated its duty against them. They have no means of doing so.
Well, I will say that I was over at Faye's house once, and her dog was messing with me, and I threw it against her other dog, and he got very aggressive toward me. So I think he recognized that I violated his rights there, because he wasn't doing anything to me. So I think they have some basic awareness. They just are unable to communicate their anger. They just bark endlessly.
Right. They need more vocabulary words. They need bigger words.
Yeah. I think that's the problem here.
Yeah.
Hami, you were gonna say, what was your question, Hami?
No, I was gonna say, as a historical precedent, before societies formed, how would this concept of owning your body play out?
Well, I would say that I think ownership, the concept, or at least codifying something like ownership, even on like a metaphysical scale, requires a social order of some kind. I don't think it even if you're alone, you can claim it that you own a particular thing, you own your own spirit. But I don't think it would even ever occur to you. Like I just think it would just something you'd be naturally invested in. And if there were more people put into the situation, that's when there's a consensus of like who owns what, what exactly is what. Now I think in early tribes, like in early very early people who are they form like groups to survive. I think the boundaries would be less defined, but that doesn't change like the fact that they would still recognize as an ontological entity that our campfire is fucking ours. It's not some like a wolf comes by. It's not a wolf's. It's not like another tribe's. It's still there. They still have a directive authority over it.
Okay.
So, what?
Can I answer the question too? Because my answer's pretty quick. It's that the reason we know we own our own body in part is because we tried all those alternatives prior to accepting this notion. That the alternatives were when we lived in a society in which we didn't have that clearly defined or understood, then we had nonstop slavery. We had nonstop slavery from the beginning of human times until fairly recently, and we still have some dabblings of it here and there, right? Because why? Well, a lot of people didn't agree that person owned their own body. They thought their body could be owned by me, right? I'm going to own them too. I own myself, of course, because I'm a white man, and so I own myself. But I'm going to own them too because I don't give a fuck about anything. Well, that's because why? They don't think that necessarily you own your own body. I'm saying it's a universal truth because the alternatives are always somebody else gets to own you.
It's a universal truth. Why are there countries like Malaysia that still have slavery?
I think it's a universal moral truth that it's always wrong to believe, not to believe, but it's always wrong to treat individuals as though they don't own their bodies.
Well, my response is it sure took a while for that universal truth to be revealed to us.
And how universal is that? How universal is morality in itself?
Okay, first of all, again, let's keep talking about frames of reference. My central point is this: to the extent that public policy reflects the simple truth that individuals are moral agents who ought not transgress upon each other, primarily for no more reason than any other, it's a reason of equality. Okay? More than any other reason, it's a reason of equality. That there's no reason why you should get to tell me what to do. And it's always some other guy. Some other guy. It's not the government, it's not the blah, blah, blah. Some random dude shows up with a gun. And my point is, fuck you. You're just a regular person like me. You shouldn't get to tell me what to do. Why don't I get to tell you what to do?
You would say there are circumstances where, we are justified in preventing someone's freedom.
Sure, but my point is that as a general rule in society, we want to default to the fact that because, not everybody, but a lot of people want to default to the fact that because there are circumstances in which some sort of violence or force must be used by citizens against other citizens for purposes that are social good, that it makes it, as a general rule, okay to use that as a rule of justification. And say, if there's some sort of huge emergency, we have to engage in that kind of thing. Okay, but let's start with respectfully and honestly talking about the impacts of the thing we're advocating for. And that's what doesn't happen. Why not? Well, because we don't start with the notion that, okay, first thing I'm doing, I want to make clear to everybody, I'm going to be advocating for non-responsive violence against people to force them to do shit they don't want to do for reasons that are the social good. I know it sounds awful, but this time we really ought to do it, and here's some really good reasons why. Then fine. Then fine.
Point that if you remove this altruistic concept of the good or the people into something else arbitrary like a unicorn, then it doesn't make sense. You're right that we should define those things. And before I've heard you say that it's important to have impact calculus, and that's when you would justify utilitarian means, right?
Right.
But wouldn't that still be ambiguous?
Well, my point is you want the ambiguity to always collapse inward, so that you always apply utilitarianism at the application point. You always apply principalism at the legislation point.
I see.
And it's kind of like how court is. The judge is supposed to have flexibility in sentencing because sometimes it's more unjust to commit a robbery than others, depending on the nature of the robbery and what happens, right? That's a utilitarian calculus more. So I think that's an appropriate place for utilitarianism. That the sentence should reflect the severity of the crime to a certain extent. Does it mush up the principle of equal protection under the law? It does mush it up a bit. But as long as it collapses inward like that in individual instances that aren't precedented out into the system, infecting the system, it's okay.
You make a good lawyer.
You would make a lawyer, yeah. I thought about that before.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I want to address like the drug thing. The drug thing.
Can
No,
I
but,
get my cigarettes from my car first? Like I left it there again.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The FDA still decided to keep it as a class 1.
Yeah, I saw that.
Ridiculous.
Just corruption, man. The
Yeah,
biggest
yeah.
funders of the FDA are pharmaceutical companies.
What I want to talk about when Eric gets back is, do we think that there are certain drugs that ought to be banned? And if so, why? And if not, why?
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't just be giving out drugs to the population that might scar their tissues or brain tissues. I mean, we have to regulate what we can provide to other people. I mean, that's just saying that if you give something that's damaging to someone, like in a meat industry, that's just as damaging if it was a pharmaceutical industry.
But wouldn't that imply that?
Yeah, but people will still find a way to get it, though.
I think
And it
you
starts
do
the
not
whole entire
have-
drug war.
that's the thing. I think like I agree with what you said, Bo. But I would add that it's not always the government that's giving things out. Like, what about a company that's manufacturing drugs? You know, then it's becomes something that's it's more.
Like,
we have,
what we will, it's
Or just
what we
individuals
allow,
in general.
it's what we will allow the companies to do.
okay, Eric, I want to ask you: are there some drugs that you feel are justified to be against the law? And if so, what are the justifications or arguments for it? And if not, why not? I think I already know like what would the thing would be why not, but do you feel there are some?
Well, if we broaden the definition of drug a little bit, I think there's certain poisons that should be illegal to be sold. And I'm tempted to say that PCP maybe ought not be sold.
Yeah.
What about heroin?
Heroin's fine.
What? That just makes your brain like deteriorate.
I'm not worried about the drug for its damage to the person who does it, because that's their consensual choice. If I actually think a drug might be risky enough to third parties to justify a preemptive address at it, then I consider it a possibility. Look, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to stop the dynamite truck guy, okay? The dynamite truck guy is the quintessential example of the libertarian problem, right? The guy's driving down the freeway, he's in a truck, he's got a truck bed with a little thin wall made of wood. And one side of the truck bed, he's got a campfire going. And the other side of the truck bed, he's got a big stack of dynamite. And there's a little thin wooden wall between the fire and the dynamite. Now, he's just driving down the freeway minding his own business. You got no business stopping me. I haven't hurt anybody. I haven't done anything yet. I'm just driving here. What's your problem, cop? You got no right to pull me over. You have a duty to not interfere with my free passage, sir. No, fuckface. You're driving around with a truck bed full of fire and dynamite. Asswipe. You deserve to be pulled over. All right?
I have a question, Eric.
So, yeah.
I brought up this example in that video I just made. There was a libertarian thinker by the name of David Friedman who brought this up, and he argues that the NAP is something that is at best ambiguous because there are certain situations where you can't define whether or not it was a transgression. And here's the example he gives. And this is what I say in the video too. If I take a flashlight, I point it at you, like that's not an aggression. But if it is, it's a technical one where you're just like, stop doing that. I'm trying to fucking focus on whatever I'm doing, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. Now, if I took like a 5,000 gigawatt laser and like incinerated your arm off, that would probably be. I don't think anyone would disagree that's an aggression, right? But they both exhibit photons, and it's impossible to use deductive argumentation to infer when it would become a transgression because of the Socrates paradox. You're familiar with that, right? Or should I explain real quick? Basically, okay. So the Socrates paradox is this: like, if I have no beard, then that's the first premise. Like, Zach doesn't have a beard. Now, 1 day of growth, because I'm young, I'm not going to have enough beard in 1 day of growth. And so the next premise is, 1 day of growth, Zach won't have a beard. Now, those are two logical premises, but if the process is repeated over and over again, eventually I will obviously have a beard, but the argument will still be sound. So it's an informal fallacy, right? Because it doesn't translate to reality. There's a point where I'll always have a beard. But people are going to be disagreeing on when exactly it becomes a beard. And he argues that because of the flashlight example, people will disagree ultimately on when shining photons would become a transgression, so therefore the NAP ought to be used as something that's sort of a, what is it? I don't know if he uses relative, I don't think he uses relative, it should be used as something like a non-absolute, something that's provided as a general order.
And I agree that you can't have something that applies as an absolute all the time and gives you the best course of action. You can have something that applies all the time and gives you an absolute in terms of the moral answers. And my point to him would simply be this. Number one, you've identified a reality that there is non-assaultive touching, non-assaultive behavior that is somewhere between an assault and not a transgression. The line is in fact muddy as far as transgressions go. But I think the point being, number one, in order to be a transgression, somebody has to make a claim that there's been a transgression. Okay? So the person who's claiming there's been a transgression will then present their reasons for the transgression. And this is why I prioritize this framework, is not because we can absolutely define what a transgression is, because once the claim of a transgression has been made, then that issue of whether the given act rises to a level of transgression, if it's borderline, has to be adjudicated. And then we have to explore the issue of, well, was there any harm done, for example? So then we look at utilitarian indicators. Instead of saying, let's evaluate it on utilitarianism, we can say, it's to the extent that there's mushiness within the was that a rights violation or not thing, to the extent that mushiness is there, little pig, get out of here. Then we can use, go on, get out. Hold on, I gotta go. Fucking Momo. Anyway, Kitty, the kitty's hurting him, that's why. So, yeah, well, I don't know what I was saying. I got distracted by these fucking little animals.
I think what you're doing, I do. I think I would agree with that. So the reason it brought me that's been like kind of dawning on me, because after the whole situation, now I wondered, like, fireworks is one thing, but what if I just had this like a big, if I just crafted like 5 just huge towers of just horns to blare, like, I feel like people would get upset about that, and there might be reasonable argumentation for a rights violation, even though I didn't physically hurt them or physically transgress. And so I feel like there are certain situations where, like, that would be a situation where it's like, all right, bro, you can't have these fucking horns blaring all the time. Like, it's just causing too much issues.
Well, right, but I think one advantage of this framework is that it does collapse it collapses in the right place. So we have to adjudicate those local things on that framework. Well, does this rise to the level of rights violation? Kitty, no, Kitty, hold on, fucking, no, Kitty. Hi, Momo. Hi, Momo. Okay. Hey, little guy.
Might have been partly wrong, by the way.
What'd you say?
Might have been partly wrong about the firework thing.
Momo, stop.
Yeah. Well, am I partly wrong about it? I was like on the bad side.
Yeah, I think you are.
Just come here, Momo.
Just a little bit.
Hurt you.
I feel like it would have been more muddier if my brother didn't engage in any behavior. But yeah, I think past a certain point, we definitely became the wrong ones in this. But I mean, I don't know. Like, that lady doesn't own anything around there. Like, she's just the girlfriend of our neighbor. Plus, it was 9 p.m. Friday night. Come on,
She's an annoying woman.
But I mean, at the same time, I understand like why it would be annoying. I shouldn't respond like I said in the video. I should have just been like, okay, well we're almost done. Only like a couple more, and then we'll be quitting. And you know, is that okay with you? And then they would have probably been like, a couple more. Okay, yeah, that's reasonable. That would have been the right way to go about it. If I could redo the situation, I would have done that. But I think I was in the wrong because of that. They're kind of annoying, honestly. I mean, they're loud as fuck. Like, they really are. I understand. Honestly, I would have been surprised if no one came out. Nah, that's not true. I understand why someone came out, but I wouldn't have been not surprised if someone didn't. Because, I mean, I live in Kentucky. There's a lot... It's not like I live in, like, an apartment complex, right? There are significant distances between the houses.
I'm looking for Avon's boo die, you feel me?
What'd you say? Were we talking to someone else?
I was talking to my sister.
Okay. But yeah, there are significant differences between the areas that you know people own property. It's not like we live in a city or something. Like we're not right beside. Them. They're like pretty far away. But at the same time, you know, I understand their grievances. Eric, I want to say, it's interesting that we had a discussion in NAP with everyone yelling.
Right. Well, I mean, I do understand that, and I'm glad we finally got to that point. See, the problem is, I normally can't get to that point ever because people are wanting to argue stuff like they don't want to get to the notion that we could actually look and see how it would play out, right? They're still busy rejecting it before we even get to that part. So I'm happy to get to it. I agree it's not absolute in terms of telling us what to do, although it should be absolute in telling us what the moral impacts are.
I agree.
Any other thoughts on this topic?
I don't think so.
Wish I had something to argue. I don't.
It's
I just
okay,
agree. And it's sad. It's really sad.
because you agree. That's sad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel you there. I would love to have a big dust up. You know how I like my dust ups. I can see. I'm looking at other people's faces. I like having other people on camera because I can watch Zachary's face and see how uncomfortable he's getting. And that's how I can tell the intensity level. Like if Zachary looks kind of like, then I'm like, yeah. Then I'm like, okay, I probably need to pull it back a little bit. But then if I say something harsh and Zachary smiles, then I think, okay, haha. You know. But if he were to go like, then I'd be like, oh, I probably went too far there. You know.
I don't know. I feel like that day we blew up and had that big argument. I had stayed up. I had been up at least 26 hours. I was like sleep deprived, on edge, anyways, and like I couldn't really articulate my position. I was just mad. I knew I disagreed, but I didn't want to I didn't present my points or anything. You know, it was just very, very, very disorganized. It was pretty funny though.
You might have to ease up on the caffeine.
Yeah, I know. I've only been drinking tea today and since I woke up, and it's I don't feel as like iffy, you know.
I find tea more caffeinated than coffee, hot tea.
I feel it more soothing. It calms me. It reminds me everything's okay. Coffee reminds me I gotta get shit done.
Did you put a dab of chamomile in there?
Dab of what?
Chamomile.
What is chamomile?
It's
I
kind
don't know.
of
I don't know. Does anybody know what it is? They put it in tea. It's supposed to make it super relaxing.
I dashed some cinnamon in there though.
A dash of cinnamon. That's adorable. I love that. All right. Thanks for watching, people. Yeah, Callum.